Hello, everyone. It's been a little bit over a week, and today, instead of telling you a story, I think it's time to just talk. Let's just talk. Um, I've always loved talking ever since I was little. I remember I'd come home from school, from grammar school, and I would just blab on and talk to all the people around me that would listen. Specifically my mom. She would sit there in the car and listen to me talk and talk and talk and talk. Yet interestingly, when I was little, it took me a while to talk. I don't think I started saying my first word until I was probably like 3 or 4, at least what I was told, 3 years old. I mean, I had my own language. I blabbered. I spoke things, but it wasn't really understood. Um, so that's when I was little. Then when I came here when I was 7, I didn't speak English, right? So again, being being shut down from talking to the kids around me, to teachers, to anyone. I didn't really speak until I was probably within like 6 months of coming here to the States in first grade. And I remember a teacher. She was my arts teacher. She started yelling at me, and I remember sitting down and being yelled at that I wasn't responding, that I wasn't talking. And there was this remaining kid next to me who let me know that she wanted me to grab my crayons out of my box. But I didn't know because I didn't speak English. And the kids around me had to tell her that I didn't speak English. And even in first grade, I remember getting like prizes, like stickers or candy because I was the quietest one in class. So, talking was always something that I wanted to do, but I think I've had challenges my entire life finding my voice. It wasn't until recently I attended a breath working session where excuse me, where through the breath work we went back to a time where things were hard, and in my 13-year-old self I came out, and I that's the thought that came through my head was me at 13. And I remember talking a lot. And I was telling my mom this story of how during that breathworking session, I was really mad at what came up as like something negative in my life was the women in my life. And interestingly enough, it wasn't like a specific person per se, but it was the idea that we were held back from speaking our minds, held back from expressing ourselves. And when I told my mom this story, she reminded me that around that age of 12, 13, everything would just come out of my mouth. It didn't matter what it was. Like I completely forgot about it. But I would just blurt out opinions and blurt out whatever came through. And I remember always being told that I need to be careful. I need to be careful what comes out of my mouth. And that was from a protective place. That was from a place where, we had to be careful what we would say, and how we would say it. But specifically as a girl, like why would I have said those things? I'm Romanian. So the culture is different. Women weren't really allowed to express themselves. They were more or less taking everything in and not given that voice. And at some point between like 12 to 14, I started holding back. Whether it was fear, protection, judgment, comparison, when I entered high school, I just stopped talking. I stopped sharing my opinion when it would cause conflict. It was easier to just say, well, I'd rather keep my mouth shut in certain situations than express what I actually thought. And this was it depends on the situation, it wasn't all the time. It was primarily in situations where it had to do with myself and with judgment and with voicing my value and voicing who I was. Because in class and in school, I had a lot of opinions. I always raised my hand, I always talked. I was never really afraid to share an answer or get an answer wrong. But other than that, it was I always saw myself that I didn't know really how to talk, like culture, pop culture stuff. Be able to connect with people that in my class was a little bit hard, you know. And then came end of high school. I remember I took a philosophy class. I think I was a junior in high school, and I went to we had a college bridge program, which allowed high schoolers to go ahead and take college classes. And I took a philosophy class, and I remember that professor. A lot of times, the students didn't know if you were a high schooler or not, if you were a freshman in college, and the professor had me read a paragraph. And I could not pronounce philosophical for the life of me. And every time that word came up, like 3 or 4 times in that paragraph, I could not. I stumbled over that word over and over and over again. And that became a memory, memory of how to communicate or how not to communicate or how to feel. I felt judged. I felt incapable. I felt small. And my entire college life then became difficult to, not in school again. In school, I raised my hand, I communicated, but when it came to situations that were just uncomfortable, I would just be quiet. After finishing college, we had to participate in our capstone where we presented at a conference. And that was the most difficult thing I had ever done to date. Speaking in front of people, I remember my insides were a hot mess. Everything inside of me was doing somersaults. I was sweating. But I did it. I presented my paper at the Regional Association of Geographers. But that was one of the most difficult things. And when I started my job, and at the same time, all throughout college, I could talk to people. I was perfectly fine to talk to people. I worked in retail. I talked to people. I yelled by people. I was a manager. It didn't matter. I was able to talk to people. So this dichotomy of being able to be expressive in certain situations and then in others completely silent, completely withheld, was something I struggled with all the time. When I started my job after my undergrad, my journey was to try to figure out how to get past this communication blocker. How do I speak without feeling just horrible about it? How do I express myself in front of people without feeling judged that I'm going to mispronounce a word, right? And so I attended conferences to present. I challenged myself. I attended presentation classes. I spoke at webinars. I spoke on the phone, and most of my job, for like 90% of my job, I speak to people and I talk to people. So I love talking, but this part of me was just withheld. And I didn't realize that not speaking your truth could really create a part. You could forget who you are, part of who you are. I mean, I was even a conference chair and spoke in front of 700 to 800 people at a conference. Yet at the same time, post-COVID, I could barely get my courage enough to speak in front of a group. So I say all this because there's going to be times, this first video that I mentioned, it's about thinking about the impossibilities. The second one was becoming somebody. You get to choose. I've got my titles right up there. The other piece is the voices, right? The voices that come and go inside our mind. And then daring to be something that you're different. Those are all choices that we make, choices that define us, choices that regardless of what our belief systems are, doesn't matter if you're religious or if you're not religious, or if you're an atheist, or if you believe in whatever thing, we all deal with things that are challenging to express ourselves. And I think this world around us beats us up a little bit. But the beauty of it all is that we have a choice. We have a choice to figure out what is that voice that we want to have. Who is that voice? Who do we want to be? And there's going to be days that are extremely difficult. There's going to be days where you have completely lost any hope. But then there's going to be days that if you choose to move forward and push forward, you're going to find your voice. And so let me tell you at least the time that I found my voice. One of the times was when I reread my journal from college. I did a study abroad program. I think I mentioned it earlier, where I went to Brussels, Paris, and Amsterdam for 3 weeks. And I journaled. And I journaled about what I heard and what I smelled and how I experienced each of those cities. And I hadn't read it in over 20 some years. And I finally read my journal, and man, I'm funny. I realized I was funny. I had a voice. I had a charisma. I had a charm. I had the ability to just express myself. And then when I went to Amsterdam, I kept journaling and writing and trying to figure out what is that voice. So again, I ask these things, and I think our action for this video, and what I want you to take away from this video, is you have to speak your mind. You have to speak what we want, what our desires are. We have to speak about our dreams. We have to speak these things to empower them. You have to speak. You can't hold it back, and you have to decide who you want to be, because there's going to be days that are extremely hard. But in those days, how do you choose differently? Today was one of those. I'm extremely exhausted. I have a massive migraine, a long day of work, and a little one who pushed every single button that he could possibly push. So in that moment, every thought that went through my head, I'm a very optimistic person, but man, all the negativity came swarming in. And so in these moments, I come here to express the need to listen to that voice inside of you that knows better, not the negative, not just the negative voice, but that voice that chooses differently. So it's important to speak your truth and find your voice, so that way, when the world throws something at you, you are able to withstand it. Because there's never going to be, I don't care whether you're the wealthiest person in the world or the poorest person or whatever nationality or whatever socioeconomic status you are, there's never going to be just perfect, pure bliss, because that's not how this life is. Our life is filled with, we have good and we have bad. We have peace, we have wars. We have light, we have dark. That's fact. But finding the voice to guide you in situations and in days where it seems very impossible, it can be done. So think about when you are in situations where your body is hurting, when your mind is in pain. Think about who you are and who you want to be, and choose in that moment that you will not listen to those voices that will push you down, but listen to the voices that will lift you up. Because it's never too late to believe in the impossible, and it's never too late to dream. Otherwise, we're just giving up. We're giving up and we're letting things just roll over us. But having a voice and figuring out that voice of who you are inside will help you throughout the days that are fantastic and the days that are not so fantastic. So thank you for listening, and find your voice and write those things down, and find a person that you could talk to when you're hurt or when you're excited, because speaking is extremely important. Have a good one. Talk to you next time.